The Nazca Lines, messages to the gods or ancient engineering. The Nazca Lines, the colossal geoglyphs etched into the arid Pampa de Nazca Desert Plateau in southern Peru, represent one of the world's most enduring archaeological enigmas. Spread over an area of nearly 1,000 square kilometers, these figures, which include hundreds of lines, geometric shapes, and stylized animal and human figures, can often only be appreciated from the air. Created by the ancient Nazca culture sometime between 500 BCE and 500 CE, the lines have inspired intense debate, fueled by the stark contrast between their immense scale and the relatively primitive technological capabilities of the society that created them. The core questions, why were they made and how were they engineered, drive a continuous stream of research, ranging from focused archaeological inquiry to sensationalist pseudo-scientific speculation. The very existence of these lines, which have miraculously survived 2 millennia in one of the world's driest regions, challenges our understanding of pre-Columbian Peruvian civilizations and their relationship with their environment and the cosmos. The technique used to create the Nazca Lines is deceptively simple but requires remarkable precision and planning. The Nazca Pampa is covered by 2 layers of earth, a top layer composed of dark, reddish-brown iron oxide-coated pebbles and a bottom layer of lighter yellowish-gray clay and calcium carbonate soil. To form the lines, the Nazca people simply removed the darker top layer, exposing the contrasting lighter subsoil beneath. The lines are shallow, typically only 30 to 100 centimeters deep, and range in width from a few centimeters to over a meter. The desert environment, characterized by minimal wind, low humidity, and a complete lack of rainfall, due partly to the natural elevation and the coastal fog known as garua that never reaches the plateau, acts as a natural preservation chamber, preventing erosion and keeping the lines visible for centuries. The precision of the straight lines, some running for several kilometers without deviation, strongly suggests sophisticated planning involving surveying techniques, possibly utilizing simple tools like ropes, wooden stakes, and sighting points on distant hills. The primary purpose of the geoglyphs remains the subject of ongoing academic and popular dispute, with theories generally falling into 2 main categories, those related to religious or ceremonial practices and those related to practical, functional uses. Early theories often leaned toward the sensational, most famously positing that the lines were ancient runways for alien spacecraft, the paleo-contact theory, a notion popularized by Erich von Däniken. However, mainstream archaeology largely dismisses these claims, grounding its research in Nazca's cultural context. The most widely accepted academic theory, spearheaded by researchers like Maria Reich, who dedicated her life to studying and protecting the lines, and Johann Reinhardt, links the geoglyphs to water rituals and fertility worship. Given that the Nazca culture inhabited one of the driest regions on Earth, securing a water supply was central to their survival and cosmology. Many of the geometric shapes and lines are believed to have pointed towards sources of water, specific mountains that channeled rainfall or subterranean aquifers, functioning as processional pathways or sacred markers intended to communicate with the deities responsible for meteorological and hydrological cycles. The animal figures, known as the biomorphs, are particularly symbolic, often depicting creatures associated with water and fertility. The most famous examples include the hummingbird, the spider, the monkey, and the condor. The hummingbird, for instance, is often linked to pollination and life-giving flora, while the spider is associated with rain, an interpretation often drawn from Amazonian mythology. The sheer scale and non-utilitarian positioning of these figures, often spanning hundreds of meters and overlapping, suggest they were not mere decorations, but held profound cosmological or religious significance.
They might have served as giant offerings visible to the deities dwelling in the sky and on the mountain peaks, or perhaps as part of a complex system designed to mirror the Nazca understanding of the celestial sphere and its influence on their world. The figures' orientation and their relationship to the landscape and astronomical events continue to be mapped and analyzed to uncover deeper mythological meaning. Beyond the religious and symbolic interpretations, the Nazca Lines may also have served as a massive open-air astronomical calendar or observatory. Maria Reich, in particular, spent decades trying to correlate the direction of the various lines and figures with the rising and setting points of key celestial bodies, such as the sun, the moon, and certain bright stars, especially at the time of the solstices and equinoxes. While a direct, consistent correlation for every line remains elusive, partly due to the sheer number of lines and the natural precession of the stars over 2 millennia, it is highly probable that some of the geoglyphs were used to mark crucial agricultural or ceremonial dates. For a society dependent on timely irrigation and planting, marking the calendar precisely using celestial alignment would have been a practical application rooted in their religious understanding of the cosmos, blending practical engineering with spiritual belief. The entire pampa would have functioned as an enormous interface between the earthly realm of the Nazca people and the celestial realm of their powerful, rain-giving gods. The engineering achievement of the Nazca Lines should not be underestimated, regardless of their ultimate purpose. The sheer scale and accuracy of the construction suggest a highly organized society capable of coordinating large groups of laborers and possessing specialized knowledge in basic geometry and surveying. To create a straight line kilometers long across irregular terrain, the Nazca people likely used a method known as the Huanca system, employing pairs of wooden stakes placed at regular intervals sighted across the horizon. For the complex geometric figures, like the massive trapezoids and rectangles, researchers propose the use of a simple, large-scale coordinate system based on ropes and fixed central points. Crucially, the Nazca artists demonstrated an astonishing ability to scale up small designs, perhaps drawn on small clay tablets, into massive geoglyphs without losing proportionality, a feat that would require significant mathematical understanding and iterative checking, likely from the vantage point of surrounding hills and not from the air, countering claims that aerial assistance was necessary. This engineering prowess is a powerful testament to the organizational complexity of the Nazca culture, which flourished in this harsh environment.
A contemporary theory, heavily supported by modern archaeological expeditions led by the Proyecto Arqueológico Nazca, or PAN, focuses on the functional integration of the lines with the groundwater systems of the Nazca Valley. This theory suggests that the lines and geometric shapes were intimately related to the puquios, a sophisticated network of pre-Columbian subterranean aqueducts still used today. Some large trapezoidal figures and lines run parallel to the direction of underground water flow or appear to mark areas where hydrological activity was believed to be strong. Furthermore, many lines terminate at or run toward ceremonial sites or mounds where offerings were made, often involving ceramics painted with water-themed imagery. This hydrological interpretation views the geoglyphs as a form of sympathetic magic or large-scale landscape acupuncture intended to honor, guide, or coax the subterranean water spirits into ensuring the continuous flow of the vital puquios. The lines were thus less about observing the sky and more about managing the most critical resource on the ground. The debate surrounding the messages embedded in the lines is further complicated by the discovery of numerous spiral-shaped geoglyphs, which often appear near the biomorphs or at the terminals of the straight lines.
These spirals are interpreted by some researchers as abstract representations of whirlpools or water sources, further supporting the fertility cult theories. Others view them as symbols of cosmic movement or shamanic journeys, given the prevalence of geometric and visionary imagery in Andean cultures associated with altered states of consciousness. The presence of these highly abstract and often overlapping spirals adds another layer of complexity to the Pampa, suggesting that the site was not a single monolithic creation, but an evolving cultural landscape used for various purposes over the 1,000 years of the Nazca civilization's existence. The vastness of the Pampa served as a multi-purpose ceremonial canvas where water worship, astronomical observation, and potentially drug-induced religious visions all found a physical outlet. Finally, the fragility of the lines today presents a conservation nightmare, largely due to external threats like modern mining, vehicle traffic, and changes in the local environment driven by global climate change. The line's survival for 2 millennia depended entirely on the region's hyper-arid and stable conditions. Now, the rare but increasingly violent flash floods caused by climate perturbations threaten to erode the geoglyphs permanently. UNESCO and the Peruvian Ministry of Culture are continually seeking sustainable methods, often involving drone mapping and physical boundaries, to protect these irreplaceable artifacts. The challenge facing modern archaeology is to not only decipher the purpose of the lines, but also to secure their future, ensuring the ancient communication, whatever its true meaning, is preserved for generations to come. The effort to save the Nazca Lines is a race against time and the forces of modern environmental instability.
The study of the Nazca Lines is incomplete without examining the socio-political context of the Nazca society, particularly the relationship between the geoglyphs and the ceremonial center of Cahuachi. Cahuachi, a massive ceremonial complex made of adobe bricks situated in the Nazca Valley, flourished concurrently with the height of the line-making activity. Archaeologists propose that the creation of the massive geoglyphs was a communal, inter-valley effort, possibly orchestrated by the religious and political elite centered at Cahuachi. The act of clearing the lines, which would have required seasonal labor from diverse communities, may have functioned as a crucial social bonding and political organization tool. The process of constructing the lines was perhaps as significant as their final purpose, serving to unify disparate groups under a shared religious or hydrological goal, reinforcing the authority of the priests or leaders who dictated the designs and managed the necessary labor and resources in the agriculturally vital valley below. Further engineering analysis has focused on the extraordinary methods used to achieve geometric perfection across vast distances. Researchers determined that many of the straight lines running across valleys and hills were achieved using basic yet highly effective principles of projection and leveling. By utilizing a rope and a basket of dirt, for instance, a Nazca surveyor could establish a level baseline, sighting across 2 distant stakes and ensuring the ground was prepared evenly between them. The massive trapezoids, sometimes over 500 meters long, exhibit precise parallel sides, suggesting the use of advanced knowledge of angles and simple triangulation tools, possibly employing a variation of the Pythagorean theorem centuries before its formal recognition in the West. This level of surveying precision, achieved without aerial vantage points, fundamentally refutes the extraterrestrial theories and instead champions the sophisticated, practical ingenuity of the ancient Nazca engineers who mastered the arid landscape. A significant aspect of the biomorphs is their construction method, known as uninterrupted line technique. Many figures, like the famous spider or hummingbird, are drawn with a single continuous line that never crosses itself, creating a unified and closed figure.
This technique is highly suggestive of a ritualistic or ceremonial walk, where the entire figure was intended to be traversed as a processional pathway or labyrinthine route. The entire pampa, therefore, transformed into a giant open-air temple, where the act of movement and orientation along the sacred lines was itself the primary religious ritual, reinforcing the deep connection between the physical landscape and the Nazca spiritual worldview. The final layer of interpretation involves the cultural link between the lines and trophy heads. The Nazca culture is well documented for its ritual use of trophy heads, often interpreted as offerings associated with fertility, power, and securing water. Scholars suggest that the creation and maintenance of the massive geoglyphs were acts of communal sacrifice and offering, perhaps replacing or complementing the more violent head-taking rituals over time. The dedication of enormous communal labor to cleanse and define the lines may have been viewed as a metaphorical offering of effort and devotion to the sky and mountain gods, the same deities associated with the power to grant or withhold water. This interconnected ritual landscape ties together all the major aspects of Nazca existence: warfare, social structure, religion, and the absolute necessity of water into the compelling, indelible canvas of the pampa. The astronomical theories regarding the Nazca lines continued to be refined, moving away from seeking a direct one-to-one correlation for every single line, which proved mathematically untenable, towards identifying clusters of lines that aligned with significant celestial events for a period of the Nazca timeline. Modern researchers utilize specialized archaeoastronomy software that can model the exact position of the stars, sun, and moon across the relevant 1,000-year span, 500 BCE to 500 CE. These studies strongly suggest that while the majority of the lines were tied to terrestrial or hydrological rituals, a specific set of monumental lines and geometric forms served as directional indicators for the heliacal rising of key constellations that announced the coming of the rainy season or the changing of the agricultural calendar. This selective correlation acknowledges that the Nazca people likely did not use the entire pampa as a single giant observatory, but rather embedded critical calendar markers within their broader, water-focused ceremonial landscape, blending the management of the heavens with the management of the earth. A unique aspect of the Nazca geoglyphs that distinguishes them from similar ground drawings elsewhere is the phenomenon of overdrawing or superposition. Detailed mapping reveals instances where a later, often less elaborate line or geometric figure was etched directly over a much older biomorph or path, sometimes partially obliterating the original design. This superposition suggests several possibilities. Either the religious or astronomical significance of the older line had diminished, allowing the space to be reused, or conversely, the later line was intentionally placed to harness or amplify the residual spiritual power of the original design. This stratification of drawings demonstrates that the pampa was a dynamically evolving ritual space, constantly being adapted, rededicated, and updated by subsequent generations of the Nazca culture, further complicating any single unified interpretation of their purpose and reflecting changes in their religious cosmology or political structure over time. The creation of the lines in the Pampa region also required an extraordinary level of social cooperation due to the sheer logistical challenge of supplying water and food to the hundreds of laborers working in the scorching, arid plateau environment. This logistical requirement implies a sophisticated, highly organized administrative structure capable of transporting essential resources from the fertile valleys several kilometers away up to the Pampa. The lines, therefore, should also be viewed as a monumental demonstration of Nazca statecraft and infrastructural capacity. The successful completion and maintenance of such massive, non-utilitarian projects over centuries served as a powerful, visible symbol of the elite's ability to command labor and resources, reinforcing their status and demonstrating their powerful connection to the deities who blessed their society with the agricultural surpluses necessary to undertake such massive public works. Finally, the study of the Nazca Lines provides crucial evidence for the sophistication of indigenous knowledge systems in the Americas. The ability to create perfect geometric shapes and kilometer-long straight lines without modern equipment confirms that pre-Columbian cultures possessed advanced applied knowledge in mathematics, surveying, and resource management. The geoglyphs are not the product of chance or external intervention, but the deliberate, highly skilled expression of a worldview that saw the cosmos, the landscape, and water resources as intricately connected and subject to ritual influence. The lines are not messages to the gods, but a colossal, durable prayer etched into the fabric of the earth itself, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of the Nazca civilization. The debate regarding the primary function of the Nazca Lines has intensified with the re-examination of the biomorphs, animal figures, in the context of Nazca pottery and textiles. Researchers have established that the figures are not merely whimsical or arbitrary depictions, they are highly stylized, often mythical composite beings that frequently appear in Nazca iconography associated with fertility, meteorological events, and shamanic transformation. For instance, the creature known as the killer whale, or orca, which appears in the Pampa, is a powerful deity associated with the sea and the giving of rain in coastal Andean cosmology. This strong correlation between the geoglyphs and established iconographic narratives suggests that the lines functioned as a massive, immobile religious lexicon, where the act of inscribing the symbols into the earth was a permanent invocation of the deities represented, creating a massive shrine dedicated to the essential forces of life and death, as understood by the Nazca worldview. The sheer volume of straight lines and trapezoids, which outnumber the famous animal figures by a massive margin, demands a functional explanation. The trapezoids, which are wide at one end and narrow at the other, often occupy the lower slopes of the Pampa, suggesting a role related to water harvesting or ceremonial gathering. Some archaeologists propose that these massive shapes were not drawn for cosmic observation, but for terrestrial processional rites, serving as cleared, easily visible ceremonial plazas where hundreds of people could gather and walk toward a focal point, perhaps a subterranean water source or a sacred hill. The trapezoids may have functioned as large-scale symbolic arrows, directing the flow of communal energy where the gaze of the worshippers toward the sources of sustenance. The act of cleansing the trapezoid, removing the dark stones to reveal the lighter earth, was itself a form of ritual purification and dedication of the land. A fascinating hypothesis relates the geoglyphs to the Nazca measurement system. Scholars suggest that the lines and the intervals between the Huanca stakes used for construction may represent standardized units of measurement, potentially tied to astronomical cycles or agricultural land division. If the Pampa was used as a massive open-air laboratory or blueprint for surveying, the precision of the lines could have served to standardize and teach measurement across the Nazca territory. This theory elevates the lines beyond mere ritual and into the realm of applied science and education, demonstrating the practical, intellectual scaffolding that underpinned the Nazca state's ability to manage irrigation canals and plan large architectural projects. The Nazca Lines are thus potentially one of the earliest examples of standardized public surveying data. The ongoing protection and conservation efforts reveal a continuous battle against both modern encroachment and nature. Because the lines are only shallow indentations, they are incredibly vulnerable to even minor environmental disruptions. Modern threats include illegal mining activities, encroachment by the Pan-American Highway, which cuts through the pampa, and vehicular tourist traffic that violates protected zones. The future of the Nazca Lines relies heavily on advanced technologies like satellite monitoring, high-resolution drone mapping, and deep learning algorithms to identify new, undocumented lines and monitor existing ones for signs of degradation. This modern technological commitment to preservation underscores the global recognition that these geoglyphs represent an unparalleled and fragile record of human intellectual and spiritual history.
The environmental stability that preserved the Nazca Lines for 2 millennia is attributed primarily to the desert pavement effect. The reddish-brown pebbles on the pampa's surface absorb solar heat during the day. This heat absorption creates a thin cushion of warm air directly above the ground, which deflects much of the wind and turbulence that could otherwise displace the lighter, exposed subsoil lines. Furthermore, the light-colored clay subsoil exposed by the Nazca people reflects heat and moisture away, preventing the buildup of organic matter or lichen growth that would otherwise colonize and degrade the geoglyphs. This natural, perfect confluence of thermal and atmospheric conditions is the true genius of the Nazca site selection. They chose a location where the lines, once etched, would be perpetually sealed by a thermal microclimate unique to the plateau. Further investigation into the biomorphs has yielded specific information regarding their symbolic orientation. The massive condor and the heron, two prominent bird figures, often point toward the direction of major seasonal rainfall patterns or the headwaters of the rivers that feed the Nazca Valley's aquifers. These figures are not random artistic expressions, they are mythological meteorological markers. By aligning the figures with key hydrological sources and the meteorological paths of rain-bearing winds, the Nazca people were symbolically attempting to channel or influence these vital atmospheric forces. The figures, therefore, functioned as a sophisticated form of spiritual technology, attempting to bridge the gap between human need and divine meteorological power in the most direct and permanent way possible, by inscribing their request into the earth itself. The concept of the Pampa as a unified pilgrimage route gains increasing support from evidence found along the major lines. Archaeological fragments, including small caches of Nazca pottery shards, seashells imported from the coast and valuable due to their water association, and sometimes remnants of ceremonial feasting, have been found concentrated at the termini of the longest lines and trapezoids. These discoveries strongly suggest that the act of walking the lines was accompanied by ritual offerings and feasting, transforming the entire landscape into a colossal linear shrine. Pilgrims likely traversed the paths during significant ceremonial times, perhaps at the culmination of the dry season, carrying their offerings to petition the mountain and sky deities for the return of the life-giving waters, making the Pampa the destination of a massive, shared religious experience. Ultimately, the Nazca Lines are far more compelling when viewed as a testament to indigenous intellectual achievement rather than the result of mythical outside intervention. Their meticulous planning, use of simple yet highly effective surveying tools, and profound integration of astronomical and hydrological knowledge demonstrate a civilization fully capable of understanding and managing its environment through advanced applied mathematics and sophisticated religious cosmology. The lines are not a mystery to be solved by sensational theories, but a priceless historical document to be deciphered through patient interdisciplinary study of archaeology, hydrology, and archaeoastronomy.
The geological stability that preserved the Nazca Lines is also threatened by localized seismic activity. Peru sits atop the Nazca tectonic plate, a highly active zone prone to frequent earthquakes. While major seismic events can cause massive ground damage, even minor repeated tremors can gradually loosen the pebbles of the desert pavement and cause the shallow, exposed lines to blur or fill with sediment over centuries. Researchers are currently using ground-penetrating radar, GPR, and other non-invasive technologies to assess the structural integrity of the lines and measure the amount of infilling that has occurred, providing a precise, quantifiable metric for the rate of degradation. This archaeological monitoring provides vital data, allowing conservationists to prioritize which geoglyphs are most vulnerable to natural tectonic forces versus modern human impacts, ensuring that the limited resources available for protection are allocated strategically to those pieces most at risk of being completely lost to the shifting Earth. A contemporary, compelling theory that has emerged from the study of nearby Paleo-Nazca settlements suggests that the lines may have been used for shamanic astronomy and ritual practices involving psychoactive substances. Evidence of ritual consumption of hallucinogens, such as the San Pedro cactus, is present in other contemporary Andean cultures. Scholars suggest that the disorientation and heightened perceptual state induced by these substances could have been intentionally used during ritual walks along the lines, transforming the experience of traversing the geoglyphs into a spiritual or visionary journey. The massive, geometrically perfect shapes, particularly the spirals and trapezoids, could have been viewed as cosmic templates or guides for shamans attempting to communicate with the ancestors or acquire visionary knowledge about water sources and meteorology. This theory shifts the focus from simple observation to active, ritualized interaction with the cosmological landscape. The economic dimension of the line's existence cannot be overstated. The ability of the Nazca elites to commission and organize such monumental, non-agricultural labor for over 1,000 years demonstrates an exceptionally successful agricultural surplus management system, primarily based on their sophisticated irrigation techniques, including the maintenance of the puquillos. The lines were the cultural and religious cost of maintaining the hydraulic infrastructure. The communal labor invested in the geoglyphs was a payment, a form of spiritual tax to the deities who guaranteed the water necessary for the complex irrigation systems in the valleys below. If the lines represented a religious commitment, that commitment was directly financed by the fertile productivity of the highly engineered valley agriculture, creating a cyclical relationship between their impressive engineering on the ground, the puquillos, and their colossal engineering on the pampa, the lines. Ultimately, the consensus among contemporary archaeologists is moving decisively away from any single cause explanation. The Nazca Lines were not merely an astronomical calendar, nor were they solely a water cult shrine. They were a multifunctional, evolving cultural landscape, a palimpsest where hydrological prayers, astronomical observations, social organization, and ritual pilgrimage all converged. Their permanence and scale ensure that they remain the most spectacular physical testament to the Nazca civilization's holistic worldview, where art, science, and religion were inseparable tools for survival and connection to the cosmos. A recent theory emerging from remote sensing technology focuses on the potential use of the larger trapezoids as indicators of wind direction and velocity for meteorological forecasting. While the primary concern of the Nazca was water, understanding the prevailing winds was crucial for predicting coastal fog patterns, garua, and the movement of rain clouds from the distant Andes. The vast, flat, and regularly shaped trapezoids, when heated by the intense sun, create unique thermal signatures that interact with the airflow across the pampa. Some scholars propose that the Nazca people may have observed these thermal and air current interactions across the lines, using them as a rudimentary, large-scale aerodynamic laboratory. This interpretation suggests the geoglyphs were not merely static symbols, but active, functional pieces of environmental technology designed to assist in practical, short-term weather prediction vital for their agricultural planning. The technique of negative relief used to create the lines is itself highly symbolic in the context of Andean belief systems. In many indigenous Andean cultures, the earth, Pachamama, is considered a living deity. The act of removing the surface layer to expose the lighter underlying soil can be viewed as an act of ritual unveiling or offering to Pachamama. By etching their massive prayers into the land, the Nazca were essentially opening the earth's skin to communicate directly with the deity, making their offerings visible and permanent. This contrasts with architecture, which adds to the landscape. The lines subtract from it, creating a powerful, enduring negative space that reinforces the deep spiritual connection between the Nazca people and the geography upon which their survival depended. Further detailed analysis of the uninterrupted line biomorphs reveals subtle intentional distortions in perspective. When observed from a distance on the ground, the internal elements of some figures, such as the eyes or limbs, appear deliberately elongated or skewed. This suggests the Nazca artists were not aiming for a realistic aerial perspective, but were designing the figures to be viewed sequentially, perhaps from different fixed points on the surrounding hills, or to be visually resolved by someone walking the line itself. The slight distortions ensure that the figure remains recognizable and proportionally correct when seen from a low angle, confirming the importance of ground-level human ritual interaction over the simple visual spectacle from above. This sophisticated manipulation of perspective demonstrates the Nazca engineers' deep understanding of optics and geometry applied to a massive scale. In conclusion, the Nazca Lines transcend simple categories. They are a complex, multidisciplinary product of a society that achieved remarkable feats of engineering and social organization in an extremely challenging environment. They represent an integrated strategy for survival, merging sophisticated applied mathematics, astronomical timing, and intense religious devotion focused entirely on securing the one resource that dictated their fate: water. The lines are not mysterious signs. They are a profound, decipherable testament to human ingenuity. The study of the Nazca Lines, in conjunction with the local geoglyphs of Palpa, a nearby region, provides crucial comparative evidence. The Palpa geoglyphs often predate the main Nazca Lines and feature more rudimentary humanoid figures carved onto the steeper hillsides rather than the flat pampa. This chronological difference suggests an evolutionary trajectory in the line-making practice. The earlier Palpa figures were likely created by earlier Paracas cultures, utilizing the hills for immediate ground-level viewing, whereas the later Nazca figures transitioned to the vast, flat plateau, embracing the non-local, immense scale that required a broader ritual audience or divine view. This cultural transition underscores the increasing organizational complexity and technological skill of the later Nazca society, demonstrating their deliberate decision to transform the entire landscape into a massive canvas for communication, moving beyond simple hillside markers to full-scale engineering projects. A significant aspect of the straight Nazca lines is the meticulous effort taken to clear them of every stone, leaving perfectly defined troughs. This suggests a ceremonial purpose beyond simple visibility. The purity of the line, the complete separation of the dark, chaotic stone from the clean, light earth, may have been seen as a metaphorical cleansing or a separation of the profane from the sacred. The lines themselves could be viewed as conduits of ritual purity intended to guide the life-giving water spirits or ancestral energy toward the valleys. The maintenance of the lines, requiring constant re-clearing of any stray stones or wind-blown debris, represented a continuous, community-wide commitment to ritual order and the appeasement of the meteorological deities, reinforcing the political and religious stability of the Nazca state over generations. The modern use of remote sensing and artificial intelligence, AI, has dramatically accelerated the rate of discovery in the Pampa. AI algorithms trained on specific patterns and spectral signatures of known Nazca and Paracas geoglyphs have identified hundreds of previously undiscovered lines and figures hidden by subtle changes in soil color or partial infilling over time. This ongoing discovery process confirms that the Nazca Pampa and its surrounding hills are far more densely inscribed than previously imagined, reinforcing the concept of the landscape as an enormous, multi-layered palimpsest of ritual activity. This new data challenges archaeologists to understand not just the purpose of the lines, but the chronology and sequence of their creation, potentially revealing how the Nazca cosmology shifted and evolved over the 1,000-year span of their civilization.
In conclusion, the Nazca Lines stand as a monumental testament to the intellectual and spiritual power of a pre-Columbian civilization thriving under extreme environmental pressure. Their complexity lies in their function as a synthesis of advanced practical knowledge, surveying and hydrology, and profound religious belief, water and fertility cults. They are the indelible, colossal proof of the Nazca people's strategic attempt to use sophisticated engineering to engage directly with the forces of nature that governed their very existence. The study of the Nazca Lines has also benefited from interdisciplinary collaboration with paleoclimatology, providing essential context for the line's religious purpose. Paleoclimatic data, derived from Andean ice cores and sediment analysis, indicates that the Nazca civilization experienced periods of severe, prolonged drought coinciding or immediately preceding the height of the line-making activity. This environmental pressure strongly supports the theory that the construction of the colossal geoglyphs was not a leisurely ritual, but an urgent, communal response to existential climate threats. The shift to massive, visible ground drawings can be interpreted as an escalation of prayer, a desperate, large-scale attempt to appease the mountain and sky deities whose favor was essential for survival during periods of unprecedented aridification. The dedication of immense labor and resources to these non-utilitarian projects underscores the catastrophic importance of water to the Nazca people, lending credence to the hypothesis that the lines were primarily a desperate collective hydrological prayer etched into the desert floor. A unique characteristic of the Nazca Pampa is the presence of several large circular hills or pucas scattered across the plateau that were clearly used as sighting points and ceremonial centers. These pucas often feature concentrations of pottery fragments and small offerings, and some of the major lines and trapezoids can be seen radiating directly from their summits. This utilization of the natural topography demonstrates the Nazca engineers' profound understanding of their landscape, using the highest, most stable natural points as the origins and anchors for their complex geometric layouts. The pucas likely served dual functions, as ritual focal points for the pilgrims, offering the necessary elevation to view the geometry and the surrounding mountain ranges, and as physical benchmarks that allowed the surveyors to maintain the incredible straightness of the lines across vast distances using primitive sighting methods. The technique of line maintenance, known to have been carried out regularly by the Nazca people, further emphasizes the ritual significance over mere functionality. Because the lines were shallow, they required frequent re-clearing to maintain the visual contrast between the dark pebbles and the light subsoil. This periodic maintenance was not just a practical chore, it was a continuous communal reenactment of the original creation ritual.
The act of cleansing the lines and removing debris served as a persistent generational reaffirmation of the community's covenant with the deities, ensuring the prayer remained visible and active. This suggests that the process of engagement with the lines, the dedication of labor and communal presence, was as vital to the Nazca religious system as the resulting visual spectacle. The Nazca Lines are thus an unparalleled record of a civilization that integrated its most essential spiritual obligations directly into its physical labor and landscape management. The concept of the Nazca Lines as a large-scale pre-Columbian sacred landscape is now the dominant paradigm among archaeologists. This framework views the Pampa not as a collection of isolated drawings, but as an interconnected map where every element, the lines, the biomorphs, the trapezoids, the puquios, and the surrounding mountains, holds a specific ritual and cosmological relationship to the others. The surrounding mountain peaks, often revered as apus, mountain deities associated with water, served as the ultimate destination and audience for the geoglyphs. The trapezoids and lines function as immense terrestrial sight lines, directing the gaze, both human and divine, from the fertile valleys, across the ceremonial pampa, and up towards the cloud-shrouded, water-giving mountains. This integrated view confirms that the Nazca Lines represent a highly sophisticated, unified worldview that saw the entire natural environment as a complex living entity subject to influence through monumental, ritualized interaction. Furthermore, the materials found at the ends of the lines provide compelling material evidence for their purpose. Excavations at the termini of several major trapezoids have yielded not only fine Nazca pottery, but also substantial quantities of guano, a highly valued fertilizer imported from the coast. The ceremonial offering of guano, a product of marine birds and associated with fertility and life, at the end of lines directed towards water sources, reinforces the fertility cult interpretation. It suggests a ritualistic transaction. The Nazca people were offering a concentrated symbol of marine and earthly fertility back to the deities, petitioning for the most vital form of fertility, which was water. This archaeological finding strongly grounds the religious practice of the lines in the practical economic realities and environmental needs of the Nazca civilization.
A recent theory utilizing experimental archaeology has definitively proven the efficiency of the Nazca construction methods. Teams attempting to replicate the kilometer-long straight lines using only period-appropriate materials, stakes, ropes, and sighting tubes were able to achieve line deviations of less than 0.1% over long distances. This successful replication not only puts the alien intervention theories permanently to rest, but also quantifies the extraordinary skill and observational precision of the Nazca surveyors. The lines are therefore a monumental demonstration of applied indigenous geometry, a powerful physical record of the high-level scientific and mathematical knowledge possessed by this ancient Peruvian civilization, affirming their capacity for complex civil engineering and landscape management. The research into the biomorphic geoglyphs has moved towards analyzing the intentional voids and blank spaces within the pampa. The areas deliberately left unetched around the figures and major lines are often as important as the lines themselves, serving as natural boundaries or ritual buffers. These blank zones suggest a precise understanding of land use planning, separating the sacred inscribed areas from the profane or utilized areas of the valley below. Furthermore, the absence of extensive overlapping among the major biomorphs, despite their creation spanning centuries, indicates that the Nazca culture maintained a powerful, sustained communal memory of the placement and significance of the older figures.
This suggests that the Nazca society operated under a shared, continuous ritual map, guided by an oral tradition that meticulously preserved the locations of the sacred drawings, preventing their accidental destruction or superimposition by later construction projects. A particularly fascinating yet subtle finding involves the consistent use of certain types of rock material in the creation of small, low-lying mounds found at the starting points, or cabeza, of the major trapezoids. These small piles of rocks often feature pebbles that were deliberately imported from distant riverbeds or mineral deposits, rather than the localized desert pavement. This use of exotic materials suggests an act of symbolic dedication or magical transference, where the act of bringing materials associated with water, river stones, or sacred geography from the highlands and placing them at the starting point of the ceremonial paths infused the geoglyph with specific spiritual power necessary for its function. This subtle material evidence reinforces the complex, multi-layered ritual intention behind the line construction, confirming that every step of the process, from material selection to final execution, was imbued with religious significance. The technological challenge of building the lines on slopes without significant erosion over time also speaks to the Nazca engineers' skill in managing surface water runoff. Despite the low rainfall, when rain does occur, it can cause severe flash floods. The trapezoids, particularly, were sometimes constructed with subtle raised edges or low retaining walls made from the swept-away dark stones. These features suggest they were designed to manage rather than prevent water flow, perhaps intended to ceremonially channel small amounts of precious rainwater along the cleared paths toward collection points, or simply to control erosion by slowing the water's descent. This practical dimension adds yet another layer to the function of the trapezoids, framing them as sophisticated examples of early environmental engineering integrated seamlessly with profound religious devotion. The final phase of research on the Nazca Lines involves utilizing spectroscopy to analyze the chemical composition of the exposed light soil versus the undisturbed desert pavement. This technique allows researchers to determine if the act of creating the lines fundamentally altered the chemical structure of the soil, potentially providing evidence of ritual materials such as specialized pigments, organic matter from offerings, or trace elements from ritual burnings that may have been mixed into the ground to enhance the spiritual power or visibility of the geoglyphs. Initial findings suggest some subtle chemical differences, hinting at intentional, localized chemical modification of the soil, which would elevate the line-making process from simple sweeping to a complex geochemical ritual. This line of inquiry is crucial for moving beyond structural analysis and into the realm of the actual materials used for the offerings and the symbolic consecration of the vast ritual site. The Nazca Lines also provide a crucial data set for understanding pre-Columbian urban planning and territorial boundaries. The sheer extent and permanence of the geoglyphs, especially the long straight lines, suggest they may have served, at least in part, as territorial markers, visible from the Apus, mountain peaks, and intended to define the boundaries between competing Nazca social groups or valleys during periods of instability. The lines, therefore, served a dual function, as ceremonial paths to the gods and as monumental, enduring claims to the land on the ground, creating a landscape that was simultaneously spiritual and political. This strategic function highlights the power of these visible symbols to reinforce social control and define the political geography of the Nazca civilization in the arid, resource-scarce environment. Ultimately, the most profound conclusion regarding the Nazca Lines is their successful integration of durability and ephemeral ritual. While the lines themselves are permanent etchings into the earth, their use was tied to cyclical, temporary events: the rising of a star, the changing of a season, the need for a specific prayer. The geoglyphs acted as a fixed, stable interface between the eternal cosmos and the cyclical needs of the agricultural year. They are the ultimate, colossal expression of the Nazca people's desire to find permanence and order in a landscape defined by volatility and scarcity, transforming a vast, hostile desert into the most spectacular and enduring ceremonial stage in the ancient world. The lines are not a message that needs translation, but a physical commitment to survival that can be read across 2 millennia.
The study of the Nazca Lines now includes the use of drone-mounted light detection and ranging, or LiDAR technology, which penetrates surface vegetation and sediment to create extremely high-resolution 3D maps of the pampa. LiDAR has been instrumental in revealing the subtle mounding and subtle topography within the geoglyph areas. These maps show that the Nazca people often built low earthen mounds and small platforms adjacent to the lines, suggesting viewing stations or ritual staging areas that are nearly invisible from the ground level. These micro-architectural features confirm that the entire pampa was treated as a meticulously planned, integrated architectural space, not just a series of drawings. This discovery challenges the earlier notion that the lines were only observable from the hills or the air, suggesting instead a sophisticated system of ground-level visual interaction designed for the human participants in the pilgrimage rituals. Furthermore, the concentration of smaller, geometrically complex figures, such as arrays of dots and small, highly regular geometric grids, suggests a role beyond simple ritual devotion. Some scholars propose these areas were used as teaching grounds or testing areas for Nazca surveyors and mathematicians. The precise execution of complex geometric forms on this scale would have required significant instruction and practice. The smaller, dense clusters of lines could represent practice fields or mathematical models used to train the next generation of engineers who would be responsible for maintaining the vital puquios and creating new ritual geoglyphs. This perspective frames the pampa as both a colossal temple and a center for higher indigenous education in applied mathematics and engineering. The final, compelling dimension of the Nazca Lines is their power as an enduring symbol of ecological intelligence. The civilization that created them lasted for over 1,000 years in one of the world's most unforgiving climates, a testament to their deep, sustainable knowledge of the regional environment. The lines, whether prayers for rain or markers for water sources, represent a communal, organized effort to ensure long-term survival. The lesson of the Nazca Lines is ultimately a contemporary one. They are a spectacular reminder that sustainable survival, even in the face of climate catastrophe, demands an integrated, communal, and highly intelligent response, where technology, engineering, and spiritual belief are merged into a singular, monumental strategy for managing a fragile environment.
The research into the Nazca Lines also incorporates the analysis of erosion patterns surrounding the geoglyphs. Geologists have confirmed that while the lines themselves are remarkably well preserved due to the thermal pavement effect, the deliberate removal of the dark, protective layer has rendered the surrounding area slightly more vulnerable to the minimal wind and water erosion that does occur. This phenomenon, which can create subtle, low ridges of accumulated sediment along the edges of the major trapezoids, suggests that the Nazca people may have understood the necessity of periodic maintenance to actively manage the erosion, not just clean the surface. The mounds and subtle boundary structures observed by LiDAR may therefore be evidence of intentional windbreaks and sediment traps designed to ensure the longevity of the geoglyphs against natural forces. This further reinforces the image of the Nazca Pampa as a site of active, continuous environmental engineering and maintenance, demonstrating a long-term commitment to the visibility and function of the sacred landscape. A contemporary multispectral imaging study has also been applied to the Pampa, allowing researchers to detect subtle differences in the mineral composition and heat retention across the lines that are invisible to the naked eye. This technology has helped identify several new figures, particularly smaller, complex animal forms that were either partially erased or filled in by sediment but left a lasting chemical signature on the soil beneath. These ghost images confirm that the Nazca line-making period was far more intensive and prolific than previously estimated, suggesting that the population dedicated to line construction and pilgrimage was robust and sustained over the entire millennium. The vast number of geoglyphs, both visible and latent, solidifies the interpretation of the Nazca Pampa as the singular, massive ceremonial center for the entire Nazca culture, dwarfing the importance of smaller residential sites. The artistic and symbolic complexity of the biomorphs also suggests a deep connection to Andean shamanism and the spiritual ecology of the Altiplano.
Many of the stylized creatures, such as the two-headed serpent, the mythical feline bird composite, and the figures with exaggerated hands and multiple appendages, are motifs that reappear throughout the broader Andean religious sphere, often linked to ritual transformation, access to the underworld, or Ukupacha, and communication with the powerful ancestors. The act of creating these massive figures was likely a form of collective imitative magic, intending to harness the specific spiritual power of the represented creature. By inscribing the image of the water-giving condor onto the pampa, for example, the Nazca people were ritually attempting to compel the real-world condor and its associated spirit to bring the rains and water from the mountains. Ultimately, the Nazca Lines transcend the categories of art, science, or religion. They are a singular, monumental achievement of survival strategy. They represent a 1,000-year commitment by a sophisticated, highly organized society to solve its most fundamental problem, water scarcity, through a comprehensive strategy that integrated surveying, astronomy, massive communal labor, and intense continuous spiritual devotion. The lines are not messages to the gods. They are the physical evidence of a civilization's unwavering, 1,000-year-long prayer etched permanently into the bedrock of the world's driest desert. The study of the Nazca Lines also provides significant insights into the Nazca calendar system, which was likely lunisolar and heavily dependent on predicting celestial movements to manage agricultural cycles. While the lines are often discussed in terms of their relation to the solstices, the sun's extremes, researchers have noted correlations with the cycles of the moon and the heliacal rising of specific star groups, such as the Pleiades, which often marked the beginning of key agricultural activities or the dry season. The lines, therefore, formed a massive, geographically fixed observatory where the horizon acted as the key reference point, using the surrounding mountain peaks and the endpoints of the geoglyphs to visually bracket crucial celestial events. The entire pampa was effectively a monumental astronomical instrument, allowing Nazca priests and surveyors to maintain temporal order and predict the necessary timing for the intricate irrigation schedules tied to the puquios. A recent theory on the purpose of the biomorphs posits that they may represent the Nazca version of a zodiac or celestial map, where the figures drawn on the ground correspond to constellations the Nazca recognized in the night sky. While the constellations are not identical to Western astronomy, the identification of figures like the spider, the monkey, and the hummingbird in the Nazca night sky folklore suggests that the geoglyphs acted as a massive terrestrial mirror of their celestial beliefs. By engraving these creatures onto the earth, the Nazca people were symbolically grounding their cosmology, making the abstract forces of the heavens tangible and accessible on the Pampa. This interpretation confirms the deep spiritual commitment of the Nazca culture to maintaining a harmony between the sky, the earth, and their civilization's survival.
In conclusion, the enduring legacy of the Nazca Lines is their irrefutable evidence of a civilization that achieved extraordinary intellectual, social, and engineering sophistication not despite their challenging environment, but precisely because of it. The lines are not simple drawings, they are the data points of a 1,000-year survival strategy meticulously recorded on the desert floor. They stand as a magnificent, silent, and permanent testament to the ingenuity of a people who successfully merged their deep spiritual cosmology with the hard realities of geography and climate to create a legacy that continues to define the human relationship with the extreme forces of nature.
The exhaustive study of the Nazca Lines decisively moves the colossal geoglyphs out of the realm of pseudoscientific fantasy and firmly into the domain of brilliant, integrated ancient engineering and sophisticated cosmology. We have established that the Pampa de Nazca is not an alien runway, but a vast, meticulously planned sacred landscape where every line, figure, and trapezoid served a defined, rational purpose rooted in the survival needs of the Nazca civilization. The construction technique, achieved through simple surveying tools like ropes and stakes, confirms the advanced applied mathematics and geometrical knowledge of the ancient engineers, refuting the need for aerial assistance. The lines are fundamentally hydrological, serving as colossal prayers, processional paths, and symbolic markers directed toward the Apus, mountain deities, and the underground Puquios, aqueducts, the two sources of life-giving water in their hyper-arid environment. The sheer scale and continuous generational maintenance of the lines underscore their critical role as a social contract and political unifier, compelling communities to commit their labor as a perpetual offering, thereby reinforcing the authority of the elites who managed the essential hydraulic infrastructure. Furthermore, the correlation between line orientation and the cycles of the Sun, Moon, and key constellations like the Pleiades confirms the Pampa's function as a cosmic calendar, integrating agricultural timing with spiritual devotion. The Nazca Lines are ultimately the most tangible evidence of a civilization's 1,000-year-long successful strategy to achieve ecological equilibrium by merging practical technology with profound spiritual belief. They represent the apex of their intelligence and their desperate commitment to existence in the face of relentless environmental adversity. The true wonder of the Nazca Lines is not that they are a mystery, but that they are a definitive, decipherable record of human ingenuity. They are a library of survival, written not in ink, but in the skin of the earth itself.